Welcome to Getting Sketchy Live, brought to you by thevirtualinstructor.com. And now, let's get sketchy.
Hello there, everyone. Matt here from thevirtualinstructor.com, and welcome to Getting Sketchy Live. I think this is season 4.
That's right.
Welcome, everybody. I know some of you have been counting down the minutes until we're back. And guess what? We're back. And it looks like you're just looking at one person, but you're not. Of course, I'm joined by my good friend and fellow artist and art teacher, Ashley Hurst, who's manning the second desk. Ashley, how you doing over there?
I'm doing great, Matt. Thanks for asking. Hope you guys are doing well out there. I didn't think we were ever coming back, but here we are. It's been a little bit of a long hiatus, but we're recharged and we're ready to cover some paper in these next few weeks.
Yeah, and the way Getting Sketchy works is one of our sketchy artists, which would be, I'm pretty sketchy.
There's only two sketchy artists here. One of the two.
We're both pretty sketchy. One of us sketchy folks will be drawing, and we're going to try to keep these drawings within 45 minutes. So it's a time drawing exercise. And of course, this is broadcast live, so we don't really know what's going to happen. But we're going to also sprinkle in some instruction in there as well, because that's what we do. After all, the virtual instructor, we are going to be teaching you a little bit about our thought process as well. I'm taking tonight's challenge, and I'm going to be drawing a sloth with charcoal. I'm going to be using both Vine charcoal, compressed charcoal, and white charcoal as well. I shouldn't say both, because that was 3 things. But I'm going to be using all those different forms of charcoal to complete this drawing on gray paper. I'll also be using a kneaded eraser. But I will point out, if you're new to the channel, if you're watching the recorded version of this, or if you're watching this live and you're not already subscribed, take a minute to do that. Just click on the subscribe button and click on the notification bell so you're notified whenever a new video is posted. Of course, we cover a broad variety of drawing and painting media and subject matter here. And there's also a membership program that we have over at thevirtualinstructor.com that includes a variety of drawing and painting courses on a variety of subjects. And if you're looking to really hone your art making skills in a variety of different areas, then I strongly suggest taking a look at the membership program. Everyone starts out with a 7-day trial for free. And we also have a 30-day money back guarantee, because we want everybody in there to want to be in there, of course. So you can check that out. There's a link in the description below. And if you want to check out 3 of our course videos and ebooks for free, you can do so as well. There is a link in the description below this video as well. But don't click on those links yet, because we're about to get sketchy tonight. Ashley, you want?
Well, I just wanted to point out that Matt's drawn on gray paper, and if you don't have any gray paper, you don't need it to draw along. You can draw with whatever materials you have. That's how we keep it sketchy, right? We use what we've got, and we do the best we have under the circumstances that present themselves. And so draw on black paper or white paper. Draw with a ballpoint pen. But whatever you do, try to follow along and draw.
Yeah, and I'll let you in a little secret here with Getting Sketchy. I don't know how big of a secret this is, but we try to choose materials that are a little bit faster here for this broadcast, because 45 minutes it's really not enough time to complete a drawing. You can create a loose sketch like we're going to do here, and like we've done for the other seasons, but you're probably not going to see a whole lot of colored pencil work in Get Sketchy. You did one last season.
I did. I tried, and but we don't. I'm not going to use watercolor. I know you guys don't want to watch our layers dry, so we are limited a little bit with our material selection in that way. Yeah.
Well, the reason why I say that is because I am using charcoal, and charcoal for me is a quicker medium, but for some of you it might be a little bit of a slower medium, so you're free to use any medium that you wish. You can use a slower medium. You don't have to do your drawing inside of 45 minutes. That's just what we're doing.
Sometimes we don't stop in 45 minutes. Sometimes we go a little bit over 2, just to get it to a place that we feel satisfied.
But we do have a live broadcast after this one, which is part of the membership program. And in that one, in our live lesson series, we're taking it slow and creating completed artworks. Right now, we're working on a colored pencil drawing of a flower, and we're going into part 7 of that series tonight. So we've spent 6 hours live and probably 4 or 5 hours outside of the live broadcast working on that drawing. So that gives you an idea of how much time that drawing has taken. Okay, and speaking of time, we have spent too much time talking.
Yeah, let's see that timer.
Let's go ahead and switch over. And as you can tell, it's been a while since I've gone through the steps here. I just keep switching to the wrong camera. You saw little flashes of me pop up, and I know everybody wants to look at me again, but
Well, we're
that, of
looking
course,
at
is
you. What are you
sarcastic.
talking about?
Yeah.
You're right there on the screen.
No. Oh, yeah, I get it. I'm also obviously as slow as a sloth as well.
Yeah, I was going to say this is a funny subject to pick since you have to move so quickly to get it done. So Matt's drawing a sloth, but he won't be drawing like a sloth.
Anyway, here's the gray paper that I am using here. It has a little bit of a texture associated with it, somewhat like a gray charcoal paper. Here's a kneaded eraser that I'm going to be using. And a kneaded eraser, just as the name implies, you knead it to get it clean. And of course, it lifts the material off of the surface. So it's a little bit different from a rubber eraser or an art gum eraser. And I'm going to be using charcoal. This is vine charcoal. And I have taken one piece of vine charcoal and sharpened it down and put it in a pencil
Wow,
extender.
look at that.
Yeah.
It looks like
pretty fancy.
a brush dipped in ink.
Yeah,
really.
yeah, a little bit. I like to do this with charcoal because I like to sketch with vine charcoal instead of compressed charcoal. And speaking of compressed charcoal, I also have a couple of charcoal pencils here. This, of course, features compressed charcoal inside. And the compressed charcoal is darker but less powdery, but more permanent. So I like to start charcoal drawings with the vine charcoal, then switch over to the compressed charcoal. And I also have a couple of white charcoal pencils and a stick of white charcoal, and also some blending stumps. And I guarantee you I won't touch all of these materials, but I have them here. So we're going to get started as soon as I get this stuff out of the way and bring up the timer.
I would remind everybody watching, if you have a question for Matt or myself, be sure to put it in all caps. It helps me to see it a little bit easier while the chat box is scrolling. For example, Brent Does Art says, "Welcome back, fellas." Hey, Brent. And we can see that because it's in all caps. So thank you for modeling.
Thank you for that. And also, you can see I couldn't find the timer, and now the timer's up. So, all right. So we're not ready to start the timer yet. So we'll start it in just a minute.
Okay.
But first, I want to just talk about how I'm going to go about creating this drawing here real quick. I've created a picture plane here that is approximately proportional to the size of, or the proportion of the photograph over here. By the way, this photograph is from Pixabay, but it's been edited. I have taken the color out of it and cropped it down so that the focus is only on the sloth's face here. But I've got a picture plane that's about the same proportions. That's going to allow me to make comparisons between the amount of negative space around the top and the edges of my picture plane and compare it to the photo reference. It's just going to help me lay out the information here on the paper because the size of the picture plane, or the picture plane, is proportional to the photo. A lot of times I think people overlook that, but that's an important thing to consider. I'm going to start by looking at the positioning of the eyes and the nose and the mouth, and then I'm going to work outward from there. So that's a little bit different than what I would normally do, where I would start with the outer contour or maybe the outer shape and then and work that way. So I'm actually going to start with the middle, then I'm going to address the outer contour, and then go from there. We'll see what happens. All right, I think we're ready to start. Did you tell them if they have any questions or comments?
I did.
Okay, great. All right. So let's go ahead and put the timer up there. 45 minutes. All right. And I'm going to start with the compressed charcoal.
Ooh.
Or the vine
We've had a
charcoal.
blowout.
That falls right out of my pencil holder here right when the timer starts. And I'm just going to kind of look at where on the picture plane, vertically speaking, these eyes are located. And then about how wide they need to be. And then the nose is going to be somewhere in here. And the mouth's going to come down. And now I can start kind of roughing in this area here just a little bit.
All right. You know, I don't know if they can if everyone can hear it at home, but I can hear that scratchy vine charcoal on the paper, and
yeah.
I love that sound. I know some people don't. For some people, it's like fingernails on a chalkboard, but I love the sound of charcoal on paper. Small pleasures, I guess. Small pleasures.
I guess I like the feedback of the texture well, the texture of the paper with the charcoal, but I don't know if I'm a big fan of the sound.
I guess, I mean, I really like to hear
kinda
20
like
or
chalkboard.
30 people drawing with charcoal at the same time, a whole classroom.
Oh, yeah.
And it just
Oh, that
almost
is-
sounds like the ocean. It's like this white noise
That is
that's around you.
That is a good point. I do like that. This guy kind of looks like an Ewok, doesn't he? All right, so we're going to go ahead and pull up the.
Now,
the
Buddy
height
has
to
a
the top of the
question
head.
already,
Okay.
and you haven't gotten to the white charcoal, but Buddy asks, what is white charcoal made of? That's a question that we fielded a few times. And actually, as far as we can tell, it includes a substance called calcium carbonate, possibly. But manufacturers of white charcoal from brand to brand, they really don't tell what they're making that stuff out of. So it's some sort of a
Trade
composite
secret.
material. Yeah, trade secret. I guess it's like some sort of special spaghetti sauce recipe. You know, the company's just not going to tell. You just need to trust them, and it tastes great. And white charcoal does taste great.
Is white charcoal part of your diet?
White charcoal shavings on chocolate pie. No, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. I don't even know what calcium carbonate is really, but
I don't either.
But so I guess I'll get an answer for that, and we'll address what calcium carbonate is next week.
So hopefully you can see here, if you're not very experienced with charcoal, you can see just how loose it is and how quickly we can get information on the surface, even though my little pencil trick here is not perfect as my charcoal keeps falling out. You have to find the right size of the vine charcoal.
So you're making marks in the direction that the fur grows.
Yeah, absolutely. And that will help to develop the texture and also the form here. So it's going to communicate the form.
Okay.
And, obviously we're adding the charcoal here to develop the values, but we're doing more than that.
Value, form, and texture. 3 elements of art all at the same time. That's how they work together.
And I'm being much looser than I probably would be with a standard graphite pencil because the charcoal is so forgiving. You can see I can just take my finger and wipe things away here. And this, of course, is the vine charcoal. The compressed charcoal is not going to be this forgiving.
Buddy says, "Thanks, Ashley. I'm always wondering because charcoal is made of wood, right? Yeah, that vine charcoal that Matt's using is probably made of willow or grapevine. Probably willow. That's right.
So we have a little sloth paw here.
You know that
Just gonna give a
those
little
claws are
indication.
almost the main character, even though they're down and in the bottom right of the picture. You know, they have a little bit of a different texture than the rest of the sloth, and there's three of them that kind of creates a little bit of a pattern down there. So I'm glad that they're there. You know, I feel like it helps my eye to move around the composition, having those claws
Well,
in there.
it lets us know that we're drawing a sloth, and like I said, not an Ewok. It kind of does look like an Ewok, a little bit. I think so many people are afraid of charcoal because they first use it and they discover how messy it is, and they think they can't control it. But really, the best thing about using charcoal is because it's so loose and so forgiving.
I liken it to working with clay as for sculptors. You know,
Yeah.
it's very easy to add and take away. Different from working with a pen or ink, which is more like carving. You know, once those marks go down in marble or from an ink pen, they're pretty much there forever. So clay is a material that we use to learn to sculpt with, and charcoal is an excellent material to learn to draw with because you can make changes more easily than even with pencils. I'm talking specifically about this vine charcoal, not so much the case with compressed charcoal. So you want to save that, you know, in your own drawings until your proportions, until you feel comfortable about your proportions and you know you're not going to really be moving contours around.
Right, because once you apply the compressed charcoal, it's very difficult to erase. But it's nice and dark. And that's another thing that's great about charcoal is how dark it is. because we see the world as a full range of value, and sometimes it's hard to get some of those dark values as dark as they need to be. And charcoal is always going to be nice and dark. Now, the reason why we're starting with a gray surface here with the gray paper is it allows us to make comparisons between the values that we add in a more accurate manner, because value is relative. So we understand the values that we see based on the values around them. So if we were working on a white sheet of paper, we could definitely still be equally successful, but we would have to consider that the marks we make initially on the white surface are going to appear, they're going to seem darker than they actually are. The values are going to seem a little bit darker than they actually are just because of the contrast of the white paper.
Now, Pandora Law asks, why are you smudging with your fingers? Is that for effect or to correct?
I'm smudging with my fingers out of convenience just to get some of those dark values in place.
Yeah.
Now, when I start to refine the drawing a little bit, that's when I may switch over to a blending stump.
In some ways, charcoal is a little bit like painting. I mean, you get a lot of material on the surface, and you can kind of push and move it around. Similar to pastels, and sometimes pastel drawings are referred to as paintings because of that blendable quality. All right, let's see. Karen asks, are these shades of gray charcoal or just black and white? They're just black and white.
Yeah, just black and white.
Good question. I have seen whole sets of pastels from black to white with all the range of grays in the middle. And those are fun, actually, I think, to make drawings with. A whole range of gray pastel sticks.
Okay, now I'm just going to kind of solidify where my nose and my eyes are before I start reaching over for some of that compressed charcoal.
Brent Does Art reaffirms what we were talking about with blending. He says charcoal is one of his favorite mediums. It's quick and easy to move on the paper and blend. And let's see. I might mispronounce your name. Shubham Kumar. I'm sorry. Hey, my question is, what is the best way to draw the fur of any animal or creature? Well, there's a lot. I don't know if there's a best way. I hesitate to say best way because there's so many different ways to make an image, and I'm a big believer in that. I like to be surprised and see how other artists handle subject matter, maybe different than myself. But one way I like to do it, and Matt may speak to this from a different perspective, I like to get a lot of darkness down and then start making fur or trying to look for the lights with my eraser or with a lighter tool. Now, that not necessarily with the charcoal on gray paper. I would probably start with my eraser, pulling out some fur, that kind of a thing. But, if you look at the paw, is that a paw? Do sloths have paws? Is it a hand?
It looks like a claw.
A claw. If you look at that appendage with the three claws coming out of it, the dark marks, the spaces between the fur are really, really tiny. And they would be challenging to draw and keep their spacing such that what the empty space between the dark marks actually looks like fur. But if it gets a little bit darker, and then you put light marks on top or erase out your lighter marks, and those small, darker marks are sort of just incidentally left there. So I kind of personally, I like to work a little bit backwards and work from a dark surface if I'm painting or erasing out a dark surface if I'm drawing.
And I would just add that directional strokes are really important.
Oh, yeah.
You can clearly see the direction that you probably should make the strokes when you're drawing fur. That might seem obvious, but still something to note. And I'm using the eraser here just to lift up a little bit of the material, just to create some grays here. They're going to be subtle grays, and then we'll start to define things a little bit more.
Okay, so to be clear, there's a question by someone who's would like for us to, or someone to write the type of material or pencil you're using, and so it's charcoal, CHARCOAL. I spelled that right. Did I spell that right? I think so.
I wasn't paying attention. Okay. I was trusting that you knew how to spell charcoal.
Well, I'm a creative speller.
CHARCOAL.
Yeah, that's what I said. Okay, just making sure.
And I am a horrible speller. So
creative speller. creative speller. That's different.
No, I'm pretty sure there's horrible spellers, and I'm one of them. And I think all the programs that we have that check your spelling, I think they make our spelling worse.
Yeah, that's right.
And my spelling is so bad, I'll put in things for spell check, and it won't know what I mean.
Spell check needs you to get a little closer before it can help you. That happened to me twice today.
Twice today. Wow.
Yeah. That wasn't because I was spelling so poorly. It's because I was typing too fast, actually. And couldn't correct it.
Okay, I haven't looked at the clock. Okay, we're doing great on time.
Oh, yeah, you still got 33 minutes. You got a lot down there now.
Yeah, so in just a short period of time, I got quite a bit of information about the sloth down. It's clearly not very refined, but it's slowly starting to take shape here. And you can see how easily we can just manipulate this charcoal. I didn't used to love charcoal, and now more and more I love it. More and more. The more I use it, the more I love it.
Now, did you say you were using Strathmore paper?
This is Canson.
Okay.
Canson paper, and it's named after the artist that we always like to say his name. It's spelled Ingres.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Ing.
Or Ing.
I don't know if I'm saying it right.
Yeah.
Ingres.
It's definitely not pronounced how it's spelled. No. So
great artist. Well, I just was curious because GP mentioned that the paper can make a big difference in your drawing, and was just curious if that was Strathmore Gray
paper
Rough.
Makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it does.
In your drawing.
The choices we make before we start drawing or painting is actually where the art begins. Material choices. They don't have to be expensive materials. We just need to make choose materials that are either we're wanted to get better at or are already good at, or in this case, materials that are appropriate for the subject.
All right, now I'm going to start refining the drawing a bit. This drawing is not going to be totally refined because of the time limitations, but I am going to try to add as much information as I possibly can here. So I'm going to start here with the eyes, just adding some white charcoal here. And of course the fur. Pretty light out here. And it seems like whenever I get a pencil in my hand, I start working a little bit slower than I should. So I'm going to try to keep this moving pretty quickly.
Okay. The chat box is moving pretty quick. If you want me to for sure see your comments, make sure you put them in all caps. But I am trying to read them all, or at least read as many of them as I can. GP mentioned before about the chart. Had a question about the paper and mentioned that he or she is trying to copy or has been copying George Seurat drawings. I too love the charcoal drawings by George Seurat. I think they are second to none. They really are. But I think his paper was definitely, that sort of speckly look to those drawings is really dependent on the paper. And I wonder if he was drawing a lot with the side of his stick, laying the stick down lengthwise to reduce the pressure on a point so that the stick could really just glide over those high points on the paper. Those are beautiful drawings. Very different, in my opinion, from his paintings. It's almost like maybe not in the shapes and the compositions, but just because his paintings were based on color, of course, and sort of the optical blending of color, and his drawings have nothing to do with that. Almost seems like it's a different artist.
Well, that's just another example of how one artist can produce lots of different types of art with lots of different mediums.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, Pat is helping us with the pronunciation of the artist. The N part sounds okay, it looks like, but the GRES is partly pronounced like gur, but without a rolling. That's what I'm being told. Inger. Anger.
Yeah, I just
Anger. It's making me angry. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to stop.
It's just not a bad idea just to
I'm just going to
spell
spell it from now on.
Just spell the paper.
Yeah, it's good paper.
It's INGRES. For those of you wondering. See, this is where things
All right.
really slow down here.
Well, you have to slow down at some point. You get as much as you can, get all your material down there, but then we have to start refining from area to area.
But I feel like I have to go fast. We have only 28 minutes left.
Only 28 minutes. Ooh, Patricia says that there is a YouTube video to help with the pronunciation of the artist name. Well,
yeah, I've watched the YouTube video.
Oh, did you?
Still would rather just spell it.
Okay, Lee McGrath tells us that calcium carbonate comprises more than 4% of the Earth's crust and is found throughout the world. Good news, we're not going to run out of white charcoal for a really long time.
Well, that's great.
We might run out of oil and coal. We'll probably run out of the sun first, but we're not going to run out of calcium carbonate.
I'm just not going to go to the art store when I need more white charcoal. I'm just going to start digging.
Just dig it right out.
Start digging.
That's great.
But, we're not totally
funny.
sure that it's calcium carbonate.
Yeah.
We really...
Right. This is an internet rumor that we
really
buy
don't
into
know
and continue
what
to spread.
White charcoal is. And there's other people that don't know what white charcoal is either. Who people speculate and All right. So I need to get some of this on this side of the head too.
But he says, Matt, to me it looks like the white charcoal just covers the black.
To a certain degree, it can. Depends on how much pressure you put on the pencil or the white charcoal if you're using a stick. But there is a little bit of grayness when I'm adding this to areas that have the black charcoal on it. So it is turning a little bit gray. So it's not a complete coverage, but if I want it to be covered, I can. And this is over the vine charcoal, keep in mind. That this is not going to cover compressed charcoal quite as easily. Just keep that in mind. So you really need to think about the order that you apply your charcoal.
Like a Seinfeld episode, we've come full circle. Earlier in the show, I said something about eating calcium carbonate or white charcoal, and David H. tells us that calcium carbonate is also the main antacid ingredient in Tums. I have eaten calcium carbonate. Most of us probably have. Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know if that is really what white charcoal is.
Right. We may be off base here. It's just all speculation. Okay, I've got a question from Ernest Venn. Have either of you used workable fixative between layers when drawing with charcoal? Yes, I have. Matt doesn't use fixative as much, but I have used workable fixative, particularly a very, very light coating when working with charcoal on drawing paper, and I stress drawing paper as in not a heavier toothed paper like charcoal or pastel paper. And just a very light dusting or coating of workable fixative allowed me to get a little bit more charcoal on that surface. It actually added sort of an artificial tooth to the surface. And you can still erase through it. You can still erase if you've used a little bit of workable fixative. The key is a little bit. Very, very light coat. Too much will darken your charcoal.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and start adding some compressed charcoal in here just to kind of refine some of the details around the eye and maybe pull up a little bit of darker value around the top of the eye here.
Yeah, we can really see the range of value now across the eyes and in the top of the head. And Matt's been using the white charcoal in a way that he's leaving some of the darker gray to show through. And that's kind of what I was talking about earlier in terms of working with fur, putting the darker value down first sometimes. I mean, even on a like a Labrador Retriever, a black dog, you can still go all the way dark, and then where the light hits is where you're going to see the texture in the fur.
And that is if your medium allows you to do that. If you're working with graphite or something like that, it's going to be hard to take that approach because graphite is much more difficult to erase than
that's true.
Than charcoal
or colored pencil. You can't work that way with colored
pencils. But if you're using pastel or something like that, then you can definitely approach it.
Or if you're painting, it's a great way to work.
Yeah, definitely if you're painting.
Well,
so I'm kind of using this compressed charcoal pencil in some of these areas where I'd normally rely on the vine charcoal. And then I'm just moving it around with the blending stump here.
Gives you a little more, I guess it's stiffer or harder than the tip of your finger, so you can manipulate it better with the stump.
Well, yeah, and I want the texture to be smoother and not to really show the texture of the paper in those areas. Like right underneath his or hers mouth here, or right underneath the nose, right above the mouth, the skin is, the hairs are shorter, and there's a little bit more of a smoother transition between values.
Sketch Shenover says, looks great so far. Good job. I love charcoal, but it's messy. It is a little bit messy, but Matt's keeping it pretty clean over there. I gotta say, he's got his paper towel out, and he's showing you guys a couple tricks there. He had the pencil holder, but had put charcoal in there. Some people like to just wrap a little piece of paper towel around their charcoal stick to hold on to keep it off of your fingers. If it bothers you, it does get into your fingerprints and doesn't want to, even though there's no a binder in there, it does want to stick to your fingerprints a little bit.
But I don't have any problem touching the charcoal. I just, I put it in the pencil holder there just because in the early stages of the drawing, I like to have a little bit more precision with the marks that I make. And vine charcoal is really not, the shape of vine charcoal is really not suited for any precision at all.
No.
So I'm going back with the compressed charcoal up here with the charcoal pencil, just making some of these areas a little bit darker. And of course that is solidifying the graph or the charcoal that I have in place already.
Well, it's looking really good up there, and you still have 21 minutes left.
Okay, still
so
21 minutes.
About halfway.
Because I have to do the background too.
Yeah.
And I need these claws. I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot here.
Well, I think you did a good job in starting with what is most likely the focal point, and then working out from there. That way, if it has areas that are more or less developed, it'll all work to bring us back to the focal point.
We'll still trick people into thinking it's finished.
Buddy says, Ashley, do you start with a fixative layer first or with the first layer of charcoal? I still start with a layer of charcoal, even if it's on sort of a smoother drawing paper and not an actual pastel or charcoal paper. I still start with the charcoal and go as far as I can, before I use any fixative.
You can see here as I move my paper towel away how loose and forgiving the vine charcoal is. And how much you have to go back and fix too.
Yeah, it's disappearing. You got to really protect your charcoal drawings. If they are in a sketchbook, just carrying the sketchbook around and the paper just barely sliding on itself, moving around, will soften and blur your drawing. So you probably, I think it's best to store your charcoal drawings in a place where other papers aren't going to be shifting over them all the time until you can frame them.
Yeah, I've never thought charcoal was a good medium for the sketchbook.
Not for the sketchbook.
No. And charcoal drawings really lend themselves for larger drawings for the most part. You can still do wonderful small drawings, but
yeah, you're making one now, but I agree. I think of it as a big medium, especially when you work with the sticks, not in pencil form. You can make some pretty wide marks, cover a lot of space fast. Peggy B says, have you ever used Spectrafix, the natural odor-free fixative? No, I haven't. I'll have to try that because I always go out. I always go outside to spray my drawings with fixative because of the fumes. And then even when I bring them back inside, just the paper sort of stinks up the room while some of that some of that fixative. I guess the carrier is still evaporating a little bit. So I have to try that. It'd be ideal for classroom use if it's truly low odor.
So I'm not talking much when I'm working here, but what I'm doing here is I'm just paying attention to shapes of value. Value is the darkness or lightness of color. And of course, this sloth is made up of a variety of different values. And these little values make little shapes. And so all I'm doing is trying to copy the overall shape of each one of these different values that I see. And what will happen in the end is it should resemble a sloth here just because of the placement of the values.
All right. Marvel asks or says, I'm a big fan of your work. What product of pencils do you use and where do you get them?
Will, I guess we need to clarify. Are you talking about graphite pencils?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I would, you clarify if that's your question, Marvel, and you're not talking about graphite, then just say so.
Well, I'll go ahead and answer it as far as graphite goes. As far as pencils encased in wood, like a traditional drawing pencil, I like to use the Derwent pencils. But there are lots of different brands out there that are great. And here recently, I kind of like to work with a Steedler lead holder and just switch out the different leads. And the Steedler lead holder kind of looks like a mechanical pencil, but it's just basically a shaft that holds lead. And that gives me a little bit more precision. But that pencil is also, or that lead holder is pretty versatile because you can control how much lead comes out of the tip. So you can kind of use the side of the pencil too if you need to.
I like to use the lead holder too. I like the weight.
Yeah, I like the way it feels in my hand too. Yeah. That's true.
Okay, now let's see. Dylan Ninja Noob asks, are there alternatives to white charcoal? Well, there's a lot of white materials out there, and I have used white colored pencils on gray paper, but if you do so, it's not going to look white. It's going to look very light, but not all the way to white. The waxy colored pencils, just don't deposit as much material down as the white charcoal on the surface. Also, if you were to use a different white material with black charcoal on gray paper, you would need to work differently than Matt's working. You would need to keep those materials away from each other so that the black handles, or your charcoal handles the shades sort of from the medium grays down, and the whatever white material you use, be it a colored pencil, it doesn't quite unify the same with the charcoal as white charcoal does. But you could use some little bits of white, another white material like a colored pencil for the lightest lights on a value scale, the very lightest values, and then you would need to really use the paper. The gray of the paper would need to remain sort of bare, and in that way act as that single value in your artwork, keeping the white and the black materials separate from one another. So it's a little risky.
Yeah, but I also am not sure why you would want to use an alternative.
Just maybe if you don't have it right now.
Yeah,
that's the only reason I could think of.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah. That's a good point. I didn't even think about that. But the white charcoal is one of those mediums that you can buy at pretty much any art store.
That's true. It's really
you might
really
could even
common.
buy it at an office supply store. I mean, it's very surprisingly very common. And of course, you can order those materials online too. But if you don't have it with you right now, I think those were good suggestions.
Buddy asks, would pastel work along with charcoal? Yeah, I think so.
It would work to a certain degree, but again, they are different mediums, so they're going to behave. They're similar, but they're different.
One has a binder in it,
right?
Gum Arabic, same binder that's used to make watercolor paint, and so because of that, the pastel may actually kind of overpower or want to sort of remain, whereas the charcoal wants to move a little bit more.
Right. You'll definitely find that if you try to put the pastel over the top of the charcoal, you're probably going to run into issues, and vice versa.
You might get away with some chalk, like some cheap, blackboard chalk. It's pretty hard. It would cut through the charcoal, but you would probably be able to get some marks down with some chalk. It would be most similar. It's almost, it's pretty hard. But maybe something a little bit softer, like I don't even know what sidewalk chalk's made of. I am not suggesting you use sidewalk chalk on a drawing.
It's calcium carbonate.
Is it? You think so?
No.
Because 4% of the Earth's crust is calcium carbonate. There's plenty to make sidewalk chalk out of.
We'll never run out of sidewalk chalk. All right, so what I did is I went ahead and just covered the entire body with compressed charcoal, but you can see that there are areas that I left open a little bit, so you can kind of see how that fur curves around. I didn't want to lose that. And now I'm going to go back with the white charcoal here, and we're going to put some fur right over the top.
Well, Ash Aurora says, I'm an architect and a big fan. I would love to see a scene of Southwest architecture on your show. Well, that's always a possibility because from week to week we really don't plan too far in advance, more than 1 or 2 weeks at a time. So I'm going to write that down. Maybe it will make the cut.
And I will just tell you that we have an old live lesson series. I did an old live lesson series where I did draw some Southwest architecture.
Oh.
And someone actually requested it and sent me their photo reference to do for that series. And it's done in graphite.
That wasn't Ash Aurora, was it?
No, I don't think so. No. This is a lesson from probably 5 or 6 years ago, maybe.
Okay.
But it's still there on the site in the vault of live lessons. So,
all right, we're just under 12 minutes. In our drawing, of course, you have as long as you'd like to draw on your drawing.
Here it comes.
I had to turn the heat up on Matt a little bit.
I feel the heat.
It's one of my favorite things to do.
I don't know if I'm going to get to the hand there.
Matt and I played golf recently, and he beat me pretty good. But I always enjoy telling him how well he's doing when he is playing well, because it does the same thing as reminding him how much time he's got left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. So I'm going to quickly add this fur here because I want to get some contrast in the background, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get that here. I'll have to do the hand really quickly here. I keep calling it the hand, but thank goodness my hand doesn't look like that.
Well, I'm calling it a paw. I don't know if that's right.
Well, you can see someone mentioned earlier that it looks like the white charcoal just covers over the dark charcoal, and you can see all those grays in there.
Yeah.
And just to prove that, I'm going to make a mark with a little bit more pressure there.
Yeah, there you go.
So you can see.
I can see the contrast.
And there needs to be a little bit of that in here anyway, a little bit more variety. This guy has somewhat of a little beard that comes down too. Goes way down. The beard becomes chest hair somewhere right in this area.
Several of you mentioned at the top of the hour, or I guess top of the half hour, that you love sloths, or sloths are your favorite animal. And I noticed, as being an art teacher, I noticed trends in sketchbooks. And I have noticed a lot of sloth drawings in the last few years, and I'm just wondering why. And my speculation was that movie that came out a few years ago about a town of animals where the sloth laughs at and then repeats a joke very slowly. I think that is the contributing factor here in popular culture to why the sloths have really become a sort of an endearing animal lately.
Look at them.
They're cool.
They're very Ewok-ish.
They're strange.
Look like a mix between Chewbacca and an Ewok.
Oh, Valerie T just put, I'm getting a Chewbacca vibe.
Yeah, it's very, very Chewbacca-ish.
Yeah.
Chewbacca-ish. All right. So these marks are a little bit looser than I'd like them to be, but that's okay.
Ernest asks, would you ever do a drawing or painting of falling waters? Definitely. And I love to paint and draw water because people enjoy looking at drawings and paintings of water. I've noticed, it's the reflections, the shapes and the reflections in there sometimes. Now, a waterfall maybe be a little different. It's rushing water, a lot of air and white water in there. But yes, people love to see drawings and paintings of water. So that's on the list.
And we have several lessons over at the site that feature water in various ways. And there's, not surprisingly, a live lesson series where we did a waterfall with watercolor. That's also a very old one, but that's somewhere there in the vault over there. All right. Let's see. How much time do we have here? 8 minutes. I'm going to try to tackle as much of this Paul as I can. Paul, whatever it is.
Pat says that
some Vine charcoal.
Blackboard chalk is made of calcium carbonate. Well, look, there you have. Look at that.
I told you.
And look at that.
I told you. I just make up facts that are true. So here with this whatever it is, claw, hand, or whatever, you can kind of see that those dark values are just important as the light values. And I really just don't have time to go in there and make this area super dark before making the light marks over the top. But that's probably what I would do here, because
those white marks are going to make that.
They're going to make it strong,
dark, I think, yeah.
But not as much as I'd like it to be.
Yeah.
Just because of the time constraint here.
The chat box is rolling, and I'm trying to find a question. This was from Danielle. Hi, can charcoal and watercolors work together? When I first read your question, I thought, no, that's crazy. But then I thought a little bit more about it. And actually, watercolor would not be a bad. I want to try this. Just do some watercolor work on some paper. Because the watercolor gets down into the paper, not on the paper. And once it's dry, it's as though it's not even there. And then you could work with charcoal across dry paper that has been treated with watercolor. That might actually be a cool idea. But I wouldn't use wet watercolor on or in charcoal unless you want it all, just to turn gray, just to make mud. Great question.
Yeah, and another issue potentially with that is the surface that you're working on. You want to make sure that the paper that you're working on is water absorbent, like watercolor paper.
That's true.
And watercolor paper, cold press paper anyway, is going to have a nice texture that's going to work well with charcoal more than likely. But if it's something that you're not sure if it's going to work or not, there's nothing wrong with trying it.
True.
Especially with those mediums, which are pretty inexpensive.
Yeah, you may develop a new process. I mean, there's a lot of ways. A lot of artists are interested in that, trying to find their own style through process rather than mark making.
And speaking of mark making, I'm making some very quick, deliberate marks here. And then I'm going to try to go in and fill in some of those dark areas. Ideally, I would kind of build up the contrast here by starting with kind of more of a gray. But I'm trying to get this information down quickly so that we at least have a little bit of an indication of it. Because this hand claw, whatever it is pretty important in communicating that this is indeed a sloth and not a baby Chewbacca.
I think I misread a question earlier and interpreted falling waters as a waterfall rather than the Frank Lloyd Wright house. Because I realized now we'd had a question earlier or a comment about drawing architecture. I see. I don't know if I'd want to draw that Frank Lloyd Wright house, falling water.
Oh, they were asking if we've ever drawn the actual house.
Maybe. I've looked at the photographs a lot, inside and out, but I don't know if I'd be interested in drawing that.
Okay, let's see how much.
I have to confess, I'm not a sort of a mid-century modern fan at all.
But my wife and I are.
Right.
We have a whole room in our house that's mid-century modern, and we love it. My wife went to school for architecture, and was an interior designer. She doesn't do that anymore. She stays at home with the kids, but yeah, we love mid-century modern stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But even loving mid-century modern stuff, I'm not sure if I'd want to draw the house unless I was an architecture student. I was trying to learn from that type of architecture.
All right. I apologize if I'm missing questions, and you can always put them in caps if you definitely want them to be seen, but I do see some questions. How do you sharpen, this is from Rico, how do you sharpen your charcoal pencils and avoid them breaking?
Well, I just use a larger pencil sharpener, and that works just fine.
What do you mean, like one of the larger diameter?
Yeah, one of the larger diameter pencils.
Okay. I use really sharp X-Acto knives, brand new X-Acto blades is what I use. You're right. If it's dull, if the blade's a little bit dull, it'll grab that and break that charcoal.
But you can also use a sanding pad, and I'll show you that in just a minute. Don't let me forget to show that, Ashley.
The sanding pad? Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to hurry here. I know I see I've only got 3 minutes. I'm definitely going to use my bonus time for this one.
So you're going in now.
I have bonus time,
identifying those tiny little black specks we talked about earlier and just give them a little pop.
I'm just adding them real quick, but the contrast is too strong because there are areas in here where there's gray. It's not just dark and light, it's gray. So ideally I need to make these gray and then go over the top of them with a few random
stronger
lighter marks to make it convincing, but I'll do the best I can here with the time I have because I still want to put a little bit of value in the background, so there's a little bit of contrast. Just going to use a little bit of fine charcoal here.
Right. Well, he is. I don't know how much of an expression sloths have, but I think you got it. It feels like the same sort of penetrating gaze in your drawing as in the photograph.
Kind of looks curious and he looks pretty happy, as all sloths should be. They don't have anywhere to be, nothing to do, just hang out.
Yeah, just hanging out.
Slow.
Just committing one of the 7 deadly sins. Every moment of its, every breath it takes.
Oh, that's not fair to the sloth.
I'm just kidding. Next week we'll be drawing greed. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, that was one of my assignments in college, and one of my first year art classes was to draw one of the 7 deadly sins.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
That's funny you mentioned that. I was just looking at the Hieronymus Bosch painting called 7 Deadly Sins and the 4 Last Things. I was just looking at that yesterday. Of course, I'm a big fan of medieval art, and Hieronymus Bosch is most likely the painter of this painting, but some people think it was one of his students. It's all the same. It came from his studio, so it's his, just the same. But it is a wild painting. It's a circle. It's circular, and you have to spin it to look at it. So pretty different. Well, Rocky Mac says, I love the hand, paw, claw.
Thank you.
I think that's good. That's what we'll call it.
The paw claw. Need a little indication of a tree here. Just real quick. And I see the time's up.
Oh,
but I'm going to use my bonus time here.
Sure.
We have.
What time is it?
It's 7:24. I got about 5 or 6 minutes here. I can do a little bit more, so I'm going to put a little indication of.
Now you haven't worked in the background.
I'm going to.
Okay. But the sloth is still pretty well cut out of the page. But working in the background a little bit more, I guess, would kind of contribute to some unity, but we're not losing the sloth in the gray paper.
Oh, I'm going to put the background. We'll do the background now. I'm just going to add white in the background. And that's going to make the sloth pop out a little bit more. It's kind of falling back in the background. So I'm going to grab my stick of white charcoal here and very quickly make the sloth stand out here. There's not a lot of negative space here, so this should only take a second.
All right.
Remember, value is relative, so by adding this white back here, makes the values pop a little bit more.
You can see some of the paper's tooth as well up there in the top left corner.
I'm going to eradicate that, actually. In just a minute.
Brent Does Art, I see you're trying to get a question through. Somehow I've missed it, and I haven't seen it.
All right, real quick with the
All right.
blending stop here, a larger blending stop. Leaving it there without any blending would have been fine too. It's kind of nice to see the texture of the paper, as you pointed out, but
this pushes it back a little bit. When we do see the texture,
yeah.
we're getting some contrast up there that's kind of attractive, and spreading it out a little bit kind of pushes it back behind the sloth. So I think that's the right call. We also don't see a lot of the paper's tooth in the sloth, and so it creates a little bit of a lack of unity in that way. You know, you want to plan to use the texture of the paper, I guess, from the beginning if you're going to. Buddy says, wow, that really pops out. Great.
all right. Let's add just a couple more stray furs coming out here. A few stray hairs. I don't think stray furs is the right terminology, but we never use the right terminology anyway, so why not start now? Or why start now?
We just call them as we see them.
Yeah.
It's not correct. Oh.
Commonly referred to things as thingies.
Mary asked from that assignment you had, what sin did you draw?
Lust.
Oh, lust. Okay. And how did you portray it with the second?
I had a man in like a cage that was swinging, and he was in front of like a stand of TVs that were stacked on top of each other, and he was locked in the cage and swinging back and forth. And
oh, wow. Sounds torturous.
I can't remember what all was in the drawing, but I do remember the man trapped in a cage. And I also remember in that critique, one girl in our class brought in a painting of an elephant and got absolutely destroyed in the critique.
Oh, no.
Because it was just a painting of an elephant. You know,
Was it the same assignment?
It was the same assignment. It was like she just didn't do it and used a painting that she had from
it's
a
gluttony.
long time ago.
The teacher just didn't recognize it. Elephants eat way too much. That's why they're so big.
Yeah, but elephants aren't
I'm just kidding.
gluttons.
I'm just kidding.
I don't know.
Yeah, she just brought some artwork from a different class and turned it in. I've seen that before.
This young lady wasn't. There were lots of incidences that happened with her in art class that were a little bit strange. Okay, so obviously you can tell by the fact that I'm continuing to make vigorous marks on here that I would love to continue with this one, but I do have to stop.
Brent Does Art has a question, and this may be a question he's been trying to get through for the last 10 minutes or so I'm going to go ahead and read it. I know we're short on time. He says, I did an oil pastel drawing similar to your poppies from a month or so back, and I got to a point where the color wouldn't lay down anymore. Any tips?
Yeah, you need to find a paper that has a little bit of a heavier tooth associated with it. If you get to a point in an oil pastel drawing or a colored pencil drawing and you can't apply any more medium to the surface, it's probably because your tooth has been filled in. So the more texture a paper surface has, the more layers you're going to be able to add. And the softer, the flatter the tooth, the less layers you're going to be able to add. So something to consider there. And I think my Sloth is done enough.
Yeah, I think he looks great.
All right. Is there anything else regarding the Sloth, or are we ready to?
Let's see. If you had more time, what would you do more on the paw or claw? Would you do anything different, or what else would you do if you had, if you're going to work the rest of the evening on that?
Well, if I had more time, I just would have worked a little bit slower and refined the range of value and the detail in each section. For example, let me reach around here and grab this.
Okay.
Just to compare, this is a drawing I did not too long ago, and let's see if I can zoom out here without putting this
Same
on
medium?
top. Same medium, same paper, same everything. And
Same background.
Same background, yeah. And I'm trying to get as much of it in the camera view, but it's a much larger drawing, as you can see. And you can see that there's a broader range of value here.
Yeah, you can see all those grays you were referencing before.
Yeah, and there's more detail there too. And, this drawing took probably 3 or 4 hours, and this one took 45 minutes. So you can kind of see the difference in the refinement of the drawing. And I just would have worked a little slower, that's all. But you can still, in a short period of time, get quite a bit of information down on the surface.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially with charcoal, because it encourages a broad range of value very quickly. All right.
So we do have one more. Do we have time for another question?
Yeah, another question is good.
Guys, you were talking about using charcoal for the sake of speed. Which would be the slowest medium regarding drawing, in your opinion? Colored pencils, perhaps?
Yeah, it depends
Probably.
on. I'll show you another example. It depends on how you work with the medium. That's going to make a big difference, because we all work differently as artists, and some people are going to, no matter what medium they use, they're going to work like cripplingly slow. And
I kind of work fast almost all the time.
Somebody asked, is the horse a class? No, it's a free video on YouTube. So if you go to the channel, which you're clearly on right now, well, you haven't gone to the channel, you're just watching this video, but if you go to the channel, you'll be able to find that video. It's just posted a couple of videos back. But let me explain what I mean here. Colored pencils for me is the slowest medium that I work with. But let me grab an example here.
While you do that, Brent mentions that he was using Mitance paper with those oil pastels. Brent, you may have just found the limit of layers that you can put on there. You might have to scrape some down to reapply into more color. Sometimes that happens.
Yeah, and
I scrape my oil pastels down sometimes to change a color with new layers, just using a razor blade.
And the Mitance paper has two sides. One side is heavily textured and one side is just moderately textured. And you may, if you were working on the moderately textured side, you might have to work on the other side. And if the Mitance paper is still not enough for you, then you might need to look at some even heavier textured papers, which are out there as well. This is the colored pencil drawing that we're working on right now for our current live lesson series. And
there's about 11 hours there.
Yeah, about 11 hours worth of work is in this drawing. And you can see, compared to the size of my hand, it's not very big at all. So this represents lots of layers of applications and slowly and deliberately burnishing and blending colors. Even these dark areas have about 4 or 5 different colors in them in order to build up the color that's there. So the way I work with colored pencils, that's the slowest medium for me. But it varies from medium to medium. I could do an oil painting and work just as slow.
Sure.
It just depends on the subject, and but for me,
and sort of what your target is,
definitely
what your target is in terms of how rendered your subject ends up, I guess.
Right. And this is the live lesson series that we're currently working on. So I'm going to continue working on this drawing here in less than 30 minutes from now, live for everyone. All right. I think that's it. Let's go ahead and switch over here. See if I can push the right button this time. All right. Push the right button this time. So welcome back to Getting Sketchy, everybody. We're going to do this again next Wednesday night. And next Wednesday night at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Ashley's going to be drawing, and you don't know yet.
I'm not sure. I'm going to be drawing a portrait of myself. No, I'm not sure what I'm going to be drawing yet. But it's going to be fun. and just bring a variety of materials, and maybe you'll have the right one.
Well, if you're not on our newsletter list, if you're not receiving emails from me, then you can click on the link below this video for the free course videos, and that will put you on our newsletter list. So you're notified when we do a live broadcast. So I will notify the folks on the newsletter list next Wednesday, and I will tell them what Ashley is drawing and what medium he's using as well, so you can be prepared.
So it won't be a complete surprise.
Won't be a complete surprise.
Right.
So you won't have to grab all of your art materials and come, two hands and sit down in front of the computer. But I look forward to that, and I guess we'll see you guys next week. Remember, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, do so. And as always, I wish you guys the very best in your artistic success. Good night, everybody.